Principal Policy Advisor and Analyst at Internet2. And I've been with Internet2 for nearly 15 years now. I work with the government relations team on all aspects of federal engagement, focusing on collaboration with other advocacy organizations, and federal agencies. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Matt. I'm Sam Burns. I'm a senior policy advisor here on the government relations team at Internet2. I have been here for just over 11 years. So Matt and I have been working together a long time. Very happy to continue to be doing that and sharing some insights with you guys today. Um, I focus especially on what's going on in Capitol Hill. So I'm always very much involved in analyzing legislation, keeping track of what's going on with the appropriations process, which we'll be talking about today, and all those fun and exciting breaking developments in federal policy. So I'll hand it back to Matt.
Awesome. Thank you. So this is just kind of a quick look at the topics we're going to cover today. Why all this stuff matters to you, how we can work together, some of our recent activities, a quick congressional funding update from Sam, and we'll sort of wrap up with a look ahead at what's coming up next. So, thank you all so much for joining us. It is a beautiful, I think, almost 100-degree day in DC. I'm happy to be indoors doing a webinar. Um, in addition to Sam and I, Internet2's GR team includes our Vice President of Government Relations and General Counsel, Belinda Nixon. We're a small but mighty team. We're responsible for developing and executing Internet2's federal engagement strategy. And today we're excited to share a little bit about what we've been working on, and more importantly, how we hope to work even more closely with all of you moving forward. And earlier this year, we also welcomed a new government relations consulting partner, Lewis Burke Associates. And Lewis Burke has decades of experience working with research universities, scientific societies, of course, federal agencies and Congress. And their expertise and their relationships have greatly expanded our ability to engage in Washington. And we really view them as an extension of our own team and really a resource for the entire Internet2 community. And with that, I would like to recognize one of our Lewis Burke colleagues, Tony DiGiovanni. He is lurking in the chat today. He's going to help answer questions as we go through the presentation. Tony spent many years working on energy and science policy inside the federal government, and we're really fortunate to have his expertise. So thanks so much, Tony, for being here. And then one thing I'd mentioned before we dive in is that today's webinar is really intended to establish a baseline. There's an incredible amount happening in Washington right now. We certainly won't cover everything over the next hour, but our goal today is to introduce some of the major issues we're tracking, explain why they matter to the R&E community, and begin what we hope will be an ongoing conversation. And we do plan to continue these community webinars on a quarterly basis going forward. So we hope to see you all back again at our next one in the fall. So let's jump right into, why all this federal policy matters to you. And we have certainly heard before, why does Internet2 have a government relations program? What do you all actually do? And, that's a fair question because most people understandably associate government relations with lobbying or strictly, congressional appropriations. And in reality, federal policy touches, basically every aspect of the research enterprise. Funding is obviously a big part of that story. Congressional appropriations determine the resources that are available to all the agencies that we work most closely with: National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, National Institutes of Health. But of course, funding is only one piece of that. The federal agencies also establish the national science priorities. Um, so right now, the priorities are, of course, artificial intelligence. More and more every day, we're talking about quantum, biotechnology, advanced computing, research security, and energy innovation. So these priorities influence where the investments are made and what kinds of collaborations are encouraged. Um, so we're also paying close attention to changes in grant administration, international collaboration, workforce development, and research infrastructure, because those policies affect how research is conducted and not just whether it's funded. So finally, we feel like there are more opportunities than ever for our community to engage directly with policymakers. And we do that through, federal requests for information, public comment opportunities, the various federal advisory groups, listening sessions, and stakeholder meetings. So helping to coordinate and highlight those opportunities is one area where Internet2 believes it can really add value for its members. So, clearly this work isn't just about politics. It's about helping ensure the research and education community has a seat at the table and, has a seat at the table from the inception of these conversations. So that leads directly into how we think about this work. Everything we do is grounded in five principles. First, we're intentionally nonpartisan. Our mission is advancing research and education, not pushing any sort of political agenda. Second, we're a membership organization, so we're member driven. We spend a great deal of time listening to our members, our regional network partners, and other advocacy organizations in this space, and of course engaging a lot with our federal stakeholders as well. Third, our favorite word, collaboration. Of course, that's essential to everything we do. Other organizations like the Quilt, Educause, AAU, CASC, and a ton of others in our space. They really already do outstanding policy work, and we really just see ourselves as complementing their work, and we're always looking for opportunities to work together. Fourth, we're increasingly focused on implementation. Federal agencies today aren't just, looking for feedback on their plans. They're asking, who can help us turn our national priorities into reality. So we focus on aligning the goals of the federal government with the goals of our members and the R&E community as a whole. We want to make sure this is a mutually beneficial relationship between R&E and the federal government, and that, we're promoting what's in the best interest of our national science and research ecosystem. And, finally, everything we do is aligned with, Internet2's organizational mission to support this community. Ultimately, our objective isn't to just advocate for ourselves as an organization. It's to support and promote R&E and really just help ensure that the expertise of this community is represented as national science policy evolves. So, how do we actually approach that? Um, I think this slide does a good job of capturing how we think about our role. We often talk about our strategy using three words: convene, connect, and scale. So, first, we convene. One of Internet2's greatest strengths is our ability to bring together the universities, the regional networks, industry partners, our peer associations, and the federal agencies. So second, we connect all those groups and we connect policymakers with technical experts. We connect emerging federal priorities with existing frameworks and infrastructure already in this community. And, we connect organizations that might otherwise be working independently. And finally, we help scale. So increasingly, the agencies aren't looking to individual institutions for answers. They're looking for trusted communities that can really help implement their goals. And, that's true whether we're talking about AI, quantum, networking, identity solutions, cloud infrastructure, or, whatever technologies are on the horizon. We feel like Internet2 is really uniquely positioned to, translate all of these federal goals and priorities into, scalable national research infrastructure. So that's really where we believe we can make the greatest contribution. So this slide is an invitation. Government relations isn't something that Internet2 does for the community. It's something we want to do with the community. If you all are planning meetings in DC, if you're, responding to a federal request for information, if you're developing new relationships with the agencies, or if you're just hearing about new emerging policy issues, please reach out to us and, we'll try to assist your efforts as best we can. And likewise, if there are opportunities where we can connect you with federal stakeholders or other organizations, we would love to help. Um, we always feel like the stronger our coordination across the community becomes, the more effective all of our advocacy efforts will be. Our collective voice is always going to be stronger than just one organization acting alone. So I will touch on some of our recent activities, and then we can go into a little bit more detail. Over the last several months, we've significantly expanded our engagement across Washington. We've met with DOE leadership regarding implementation of the Genesis mission. We've increased our engagement with congressional offices working on AI policy. And we just a few days ago submitted comments on OMB's proposed grant guidance. And, through all this, we've worked alongside many organizations on joint advocacy efforts. Um, One thing I'd emphasize is that relationship building is long-term work. So, not every Hill meeting that we have results in, a big headline or a big action item. But those conversations help us build trust over time. So they ensure that policymakers understand the value of Internet2 and of this broader community, before major decisions are put in front of them. And also before we're going in with any kind of ask for them. So we've built up that trust beforehand. So I'm sure most of you or all of you are aware of or have submitted your own comments to OMB regarding their kind of sweeping proposal to overhaul the federal grant system. So OMB was proposing significant revisions to the uniform guidance, which are the rules governing how federal grants are administered. And those changes would touch on everything from grant reviews to research collaboration, conference participation, and allowable costs. So we, of course, thought it would be important for us to engage in this proceeding. And a few weeks ago, we had actually joined hundreds of research and science groups to sign a letter asking OMB to extend this comment period so that people could have more time to digest it and respond. That did not happen, and they stuck with their original deadline of this past Monday. So we decided to submit our own comments before that deadline closed. So our comments were intended to support the entire R&E community, support research security and responsible stewardship of federal funding. Research institutions really need clarity, predictability, and flexibility to continue their mission in supporting world-class research. So our recommendations focused on preserving merit review, protecting long-term research infrastructure, of course, our favorite, supporting scientific collaboration, um, balancing research security with international engagement, and recognizing the important role shared national infrastructure provided by R&E networks plays in advancing federal priorities. And on Monday, at the time of this comment period closing, I think there were nearly 500,000 comments. Reports say they were kind of overwhelmingly negative and opposed to the updated rules. So now OMB will start reviewing comments before they issue a final rule. And, we'll continue following this process and see what happens. So another thing we've been focused on is the Genesis mission, which continues from moving from vision toward implementation. If you're not familiar with it, Genesis is DOE's long-term initiative to accelerate scientific discovery through AI, advanced computing, networking, data, and research infrastructure. And from our perspective, this is exciting beyond just like a funding perspective, but it's the opportunity to kind of do what we do best and help connect all of our community members, national labs, and federal agencies through our research infrastructure. Um, so we've had productive conversations with DOE leadership where we've promoted the role of R&E in supporting this initiative. And, one consistent message that we've heard from them, as always, is that the successful implementation is going to depend on effective collaboration and communication between all these different sectors of R&E. And of course, there we are, Internet2, right in the center of the community. So we want to contribute and help DOE implement and scale this initiative as it moves forward. So we're looking to continue those conversations, while, as always, looking for opportunities for broader community participation. And DOE is hosting a big event next week on the 22nd. I believe they'll be announcing Genesis funding recipients. So we should be hearing a lot more information in the coming weeks. Um, Another thing we've been focused on is the National AI Research Resource. And it has a sort of a similar objective to Genesis. Its goal is to broaden and democratize access to advanced AI resources. So researchers across the country, not just a handful of institutions, can participate in cutting edge AI research. We've been engaged with the NAIR since the early days of the task force. We've partnered with NSF to convene the NAIR annual meeting for the past 2 years. And as the implementation continues, we see opportunities to contribute through networking, trusted identity, cloud connectivity, and community coordination. And I should mention that our efforts with the NAIR are led by our internal research engagement team, which, as the name suggests, is extremely engaged and working closely with our research community to really advance these priorities. So at this point, I will turn it over to Sam, who is going to build on this discussion by getting a little bit more into quantum, AI legislation, and the broader congressional landscape.
Thank you very much, Matt. So yeah, pivoting to quantum. So we're starting to see quantum information science and technology return as a significant priority for the federal science policy making community. So obviously it's been kind of overshadowed by the focus on AI for the last couple of years, but quantum information science is once again getting some more high level attention, which is a great thing to see because it's been an important emerging issue for years now, and it's good to see it kind of getting a little bit more focus and support again. On about 3 weeks ago, the Department of Energy announced what they're calling their Quantum Genesis Initiative. So this is an effort to develop what they're looking for is the world's first fault-tolerant, scientifically relevant quantum computing capability, and they are targeting 2028 for that effort. So obviously the name Quantum Genesis, they're describing this as sort of a foundational element of the broader Genesis mission. It's kind of under this sweeping umbrella of efforts that the Department of Energy have been undertaking for the last number of months, and an expansion of that into sort of a new field, but a related one. So just before DOE's announcement, the White House released an executive order that was titled Ushering in the Next Frontier of Quantum Innovation. So that essentially laid the groundwork for DOE's activities in this space by establishing what they're calling the Quantum Computer for Application Development and Discovery Science Effort, or the fun acronym they came up with there, QC-ADS. Those of you who have spent some time paying attention to what's going on in Washington know the federal government, Congress love their acronyms. Some are better than others. This one I think is decent. It's certainly relatively intelligible as they go. DOE has been specifically directed by the administration through this executive order to pursue public-private partnership models to understand the cost, scope, potential timeline for delivery of at least one quantum computer of this kind at a DOE facility, with the intention of for that to be made available to the scientific community to use as a resource going forward. So again, the target's 2028, but in hopefully through engagement with our community and other stakeholders, they'll get a better sense of what it's really going to take to pull that off. Um, on that note, this effort's going to create a lot of great new opportunities for our community to engage with federal science policy priorities on what will be a significant scientific endeavor, especially as I noted that this is being wrapped into the broader Genesis mission effort, which is a major focus for the administration and for DOE in particular. Additionally, as part of this executive order, um, we're going to be seeing the target is for within 6 months, an update to the 2018 National Quantum Strategy, um, which has not really been updated in a meaningful way in the last few years. So again, obviously, a refocusing on this space and these kinds of scientific endeavors. So that will provide both an opportunity for engagement for our community to help establish what the role of the R&A community ought to be in this effort. And it will also give us some greater insight into the overall direction of federal policy in this area going forward, which will be very helpful. Um, of course, um, the infrastructure capabilities and expertise both at Internet2 and across the community are going to be crucial to the success of these efforts. So naturally, we're going to be looking to play a constructive role in them going forward through our engagement with the folks at DOE, folks in the administration, and policymakers and their staff on Capitol Hill as well. So with that, we can pivot over to talking a little bit about federal AI legislation. So before we do that, I just want to set the record straight. Yes, this is an image of me getting to know a piece of legislation a little bit better. No, I do not know how these photos keep making their way onto the internet while I'm at work. Um, I would normally hold for laughter here, but because I can't see or hear you, I'm just going to have to assume that I got at least a chuckle to a cackle from all of you and take that for what it is. With that out of the way, I'll get into the details here. So we just wanted to grab onto a couple of pieces of recent legislation that can give you some good examples of the current landscape on the Hill. So the first one is the Great American AI Act. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation on the House side. It is a big, big bill, more than 260 pages. And in those 260 pages, they seek to do a whole lot. Everything from mandating the creation of publicly posted risk frameworks for frontier AI models to a 3-year moratorium on state AI regulations. That's been an ongoing conversation. Some on Capitol Hill have been seeking as long as a 10-year moratorium on state AI regulations. So this would be a comparative compromise. And also things like investing in education and training to better prepare teachers and students for how to engage successfully with AI technologies going forward in their education and beyond. Um, so for our purposes, there are a couple of notable things that I wanted to call out, both NSF related. So the first is that the bill would propose codifying the NAIR. So it would not provide a dedicated funding stream to support the program, unfortunately, but it would help it to move definitively past the pilot stage and enable it to flourish as a regular part of NSF's investment and engagement with the R&E community on AI research. So that would definitely be a positive were that provision to become law. So secondly, the bill would propose creating a new grant program at NSF that is focused on investing in smaller higher education institutions. They define it as not the top 100 investors in this space of AI research. And the goal would be to broaden participation in artificial intelligence research, education, and workforce development by increasing capacity and partnerships for AI research and development across the country. So similarly to the previous provision, there would be no dedicated funding stream just for this program either in the current formulation of the bill. But obviously, this kind of new grant program would provide a nice complement to the efforts of the NARA to date and going forward. Um, so, in summary on this, it's worth noting that this particular bill has not yet been formally introduced into the House. It's still what's called a discussion draft, which is essentially meaning that it's still in the process of being worked on. They're responding to feedback from external stakeholders, from other members of Congress and their staffs, and trying to work out if there are any changes that need to be made before the bill is ready to be formally introduced into the processes of the House. Um, and for reasons that I'll get into in a little bit, um, even if that bill were ready to go right this second, uh, kind of unlikely that we would be seeing that moving anywhere in the next few months. So it's more likely than not that this will be kind of a good guidepost going forward for um, some potential future legislation that we may be seeing next year and beyond, addressing a number of these AI related policy issues. Um, so the second bill that I'd like to call out is called the Homestake AI Act. This actually would be hot off the presses. It may be introduced as early as today, but likely we'll be seeing it by the end of the week or into next week. So this is a bipartisan Senate bill. And as compared to the Great American AI Act that we were just talking about, this is a much, much narrower, more focused bill. This would create a new pilot program at DOE that's intended to align with the Genesis mission's goals. And specifically, what they're looking to do is collect, catalog, and sequence genomes and metabolites, new word for me today, maybe for you as well, to create new data sets for use in medical research. So this would be, again, a very focused effort by policymakers on the Hill to try to address a specific need for data that can be added into the broader Genesis mission's efforts and the platform that it hopes to create to enable useful research going forward. Um, so, like I said, that's just two examples of some of the legislation that's been worked on in the last few months on the Hill related to AI. And like I said, there's a broad range of things being addressed here. Some are trying to tackle, a whole range of issues all in one go. Some are focused on more narrow issues and trying to get a targeted solution across the finish line as quickly as possible and with the least amount of controversy possible. Um, with that, Matt, if you could go to the next slide. Um, we are continuing to see that there's a lot of bipartisan cooperation on AI policy. As I mentioned, both of those two bills, good examples of bipartisan coalition efforts. Um, but with that said, agreement on the details is still remaining challenging. There is broad interest on Capitol Hill in addressing a lot of the major issues around AI that are emerging on a daily basis. But how we actually find the right solutions and what direction we should go in is still very much up for debate. Um, there are, with that said, a number of members of both parties in both chambers who are continuing to try to lead on science and technology issues related to AI. And we have been meeting and working with some of those offices and are going to continue to try to engage with them to both better understand their priorities and to help educate them on the R&E community's ongoing work and it's their ongoing needs in this space to make sure, as Matt had touched on before, that the needs of our community are being met, and we are also managing to be helpful, productive partners to federal policymakers as they're trying to solve some of these problems and wrap their arms around what the problems really look like on the ground as opposed to at the 50,000-foot level. Um, we are expecting to see a lot of legislative activity around AI in the new Congress. Like I said, there's been kind of a building interest and recognition that there needs to be more action, whatever it may look like. And we're expecting this to particularly be true if the House of Representatives flips control from the current Republican majority to a Democratic one. Um, and as I said, there's an increasing awareness of the need for increased federal investment, uh, new guidance and standards, oversight over emerging technologies and new models. And House Democrats in particular have made it very clear that they're eager to be proactive if they take the majority and try to put forward some solutions to some of these challenges and lay out some guideposts for where we ought to be going as a nation and as a research and education community investing in this going forward. To that end, Minority Leader in the House, Jeffries, has created what's called the House Democratic Commission on AI and the Innovation Economy. So this is a group that he stood up, I believe it was just the very tail end of 2025, with the goal of trying to develop sort of a scaffolding for an AI agenda. Should Democrats take back the majority in the midterms, and should Leader Jeffries be promoted to Speaker Jeffries, running the whole chamber? So we've been meeting with several leaders of this group over the last number of weeks, and in our conversations with them, we had gone in with sort of a hope or an expectation that perhaps this group might be able to or be aiming to produce a public facing framework of some kind to help us better understand and plan going forward for how we ought to engage on these issues. Unfortunately, it's looking like increasingly the focus is going to be on internal deliberations and planning for the time being, likely until after the midterms. And, whatever the result may be there, I'm sure they'll be pivoting into a more public facing messaging stage on what those plans might actually look like and what kind of legislation we can reasonably expect to see and be prioritized. As I mentioned, we're meeting with leaders of that group to try to better understand some of those priorities, and we're going to be continuing to engage with them over the next coming months um, uh, through the midterms and beyond. Um, Getting to the fun, exciting, and always dramatic congressional funding update. Unsurprisingly, Congress is a mess right now. I think that's something everybody understands and expects. But with that said, things are especially messy right now. To go back a couple of steps, the House had weeks ago made fairly quick progress on getting all 12 of the fiscal 2027 year appropriations bills through the Appropriations Committee, who's in charge of developing those pieces of legislation and putting them forward for consideration by the whole body. And just as a quick refresher and primer for everybody, the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st every year and runs through September 30th of the following year. So right now, we're just a few short weeks away from the end of the fiscal 2026 federal fiscal year and quickly pivoting into fiscal 27. As I mentioned, there was quick progress in getting all 12 of those necessary appropriations bills through committee ready for consideration by the whole House. Unfortunately, only two of them have actually passed so far. Um, so the bills most relevant to funding R&E endeavors are not amongst those two bills that have already passed. But we have been able to review them and understand the details a little bit better. So they do contain, unfortunately, some cuts for NSF and other agencies that are important to our community. However, thankfully, they are nowhere near as close to the level of severity that had been requested by the White House in its budget proposal earlier this spring. Um, so that was a little bright spot in the process there. But as I said, those bills are not actually complete. They're just proposals still at this point, have yet to be voted on by the whole House. And unfortunately, the House of Representatives for the last 3 weeks and counting has ground to a complete halt. The reasons for that are kind of complex, but in essence, a group of conservative House Republicans have sort of revolted against their own leadership on multiple issues. The main two at this point are an increasing desire and frustration with their leadership for not bringing what they consider to be significant enough immigration related legislation to the floor for a vote. The details of what they actually want that to look like are complicated and not worth getting into at this particular juncture. But they just want action of some kind because they feel like they've been repeatedly promised that it would be made a priority, but that hasn't been delivered on. The other major issue that's causing friction and causing these revolts is a desire to support the White House's effort to get a particular piece of legislation called the Save America Act onto the floor for a vote. So the Save America Act is uh, a fairly large bill that would make a number of changes to the rules for voting in federal elections and seek to do them in advance of the upcoming midterms. That's been an ongoing issue where the administration has tried to find various mechanisms to try to get this piece of legislation through the House and through the Senate, none of which have worked so far. So they're continuing to push, and they have found common cause with a number of members of the more conservative flank of the House Republicans who are interested in also trying to make that a reality. Um, so there had been some hopes that the recess that the House just returned from on Monday would have been able to kind of ease the path to resolution on some of these issues and allow the House to start to function again. But unfortunately, so far the situation has not meaningfully improved. So work in the House remains frozen in place for the time being. Now, flipping over to the Senate side, the situation has also been frozen, but for very different reasons. Predominantly, the issue has been ongoing disagreements on top line funding numbers for military spending versus domestic spending. So unlike the House, which at least managed to get some proposal through the Appropriations Committee on their side, so that there were some bills that were ready to go that had, you know, details on how they wanted funding for any given agency to function in the coming fiscal year. The Senate has not made that much progress. Um, so at the root of the issue is Senate Democrats want to have an agreement, a firm agreement on the total numbers of the military versus domestic spending. before they'll start negotiating on the details of any particular bill or any particular agency's funding. At the same time, Senate Republicans have expressed an unwillingness to commit to the traditional bargain on this issue when it comes up, which is we will allow for an increase in defense spending whilst also coming to an agreement on proportional increases in domestic spending. Um, so far, neither side has been willing to budge on those two positions, so we have remained stuck. In addition to that overall disagreement, we have had some issues with absences and changes to the body. So, as I'm sure many of you know, Senator Graham of South Carolina passed away just a couple of days ago. Um, and whilst his replacement has, I think, as of yesterday, been sworn into office, so that the seat is filled and there's someone there to be able to vote in that seat. The issue is that Senator Graham was a senior member of the Senate Appropriations Committee and a very important partner in negotiating solutions to fiscal impasses of this nature. And in addition to that, he was the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, a very powerful position and very much involved in a lot of these issues from start to finish. So without him there, a key player is absent from the ability to try to find some kind of resolution to this issue. In addition to that, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky has been absent from the Senate for weeks due to health issues. And as I mentioned, he also would historically be a major player in trying to unbreak the logjam here. So that coupled with the fact that Senator Susan Collins, who's the chair of the Appropriations Committee, is in the midst of her own reelection battle in the midterms coming up, has created a lot of friction as some members on the Democratic side have been unwilling to try to, come to a compromise that might potentially give her a win to be able to run it in her reelection. So there's a lot of complicated dynamics at play there that are making it so that this process is just not working as it ought to be. Um, all of that means that increasingly what we're looking at is probably going to be a short-term continuing resolution. So continuing resolution would just be a short-term extension of funding, typically at current levels from the current fiscal year into some period in the next fiscal year until a more permanent solution can be worked out. So these are not uncommon. I'm sure some of you may have heard of continuing resolutions before. We've had a bunch of them even just in the last year. Um, and it's not unusual for that to be necessary around this time of year, especially in an election year, as there's a lot of pressures to avoid both the possibility of a shutdown, but also the need for taking a controversial vote on funding for any particular priority. Typically, a continuing resolution around this time in these kinds of general circumstances, we'd expect to last until around mid-December. Again, usually there's a desire to kind of kick the can down the road to pass the election and then work out the details after everyone's, you know, settled their personal future in politics going forward. So that's likely what we're going to see this year. But with all these combined pressures, it's less likely that we're going to have a smooth path to an agreement. And we may end up seeing a fight over the details about this right up until that September 30th deadline that I mentioned. So it will be interesting, and we will be keeping a very close eye on it going forward. So Matt, we can move on to the next slide. So also funding related, just want to touch on this really quick. Um, so the science-focused publications, Science and Nature, have reported that roughly $1 billion of NSF's more than $8 billion budget for the current fiscal 2026 year never actually made it to the directorates as intended. Additionally, NSF is reported to be in the process of clawing back as much as $500 million from three particular directorates. Those would be engineering, computer and information science and engineering, and mathematical and physical science. So those three directorates may be losing some funding that they had already been given and intended to roll out the door through the grant making process as they normally would in a given fiscal year. Um, so NSF has not been the only agency to withhold or redirect funds appropriated by Congress in the past year and a half, or historically for that matter, but this has been a pattern that we've seen across agencies, and it is driven mainly by directives from OMB to reshape the way federal funding is utilized writ large. Much of that in line with the proposals in the OMB proposed guidance that Matt had mentioned before, that we and many others filed comments on to try to respond to the changes that OMB is proposing. Um, so while it's important to note that these specific reports might not be completely accurate, the overall pattern is still very clear. We are seeing less awards being made and less funding being obligated towards those awards. And at the end of the day, that means funding is not being used the way that Congress has directed it to be spent. And importantly for our community, that fewer research projects are actually benefiting from federal support. Obviously, a challenge and a challenging time, and something that we will be continuing to keep our eyes on going forward. So, uh, sorry to have a bit of a dour note there, but moving to our next slide, I can talk a little bit about the path forward. Um, so, as you no doubt can glean from your own insights, as well as those that we've shared today, federal policy now more than ever is evolving rapidly. Um, we are working to continue strengthening our relationships with partners in federal agencies, with policymakers and their staffs on the Hill, in order to ensure that our community is best positioned to respond to both the opportunities and challenges that are coming out of these changing federal policies and funding priorities. Um, so, from funding to grant roles, agency structure, investment priorities, there are a great number of opportunities and challenges before us. And fundamentally, collaboration between us and you across our community and with policymakers on the Hill and in the agencies of the federal government is going to be essential to ensuring the continued success, health, and future of our community and the US research and scientific enterprise more broadly. Then lastly, I just want to say, in going to our final slide, um, we want to continue the conversation with you guys. Really and truly, we do mean it. We want you to reach out to our team, whatever it is that you're interested in discussing, whether it's sharing information on the latest and greatest developments on Capitol Hill, helping to build agency relationships, helping to identify and utilize funding opportunities, or just collaborating generally on strategy and messaging going forward. We're here to help, and we're here to partner with you all. So you can reach us by email, the whole team at grt@internet2.edu, or reach out to any of us individually with our email addresses there. Hopefully, one of your major takeaways from this webinar, if you didn't already know us, is we're actually quite friendly and fun to talk to. So please do take us up on that opportunity. And with that, I think we will end our presentation and move to Q&A. So thank you all very much for your time and attention.